People ask me, why do you speak in schools? Because that's where the money's at. And I believe that's where I feel the pleasure of God when I'm in front of, just like it was this week. I was in front of upstate New York, about 3,000 students, several auditoriums, and I taught them how to be emotionally resilient, to cure them of their offendability, to teach them how to love their life, the life they have, not the one they wish they have, so they don't needlessly suffer. And so every day is just an unbelievable blessing to share all that I have learned over the years.
Brooks, how are you? It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Long time no see.
I know, but I'm recovering from your hug.
That's right. All right, EQ gangsters, buckle up and strap in. We've got an awesome episode for you today. Let me read the bio of this super dude that we're going to be talking to today. Dr. Brooks Gibbs is a social psychologist and award-winning resilience educator who teaches students how to regulate emotions and solve social problems. Over 2,500 schools have hired him to speak, allowing him to reach 2 million students face-to-face. His viral videos have amassed more than 300 million views worldwide. So I'm going to put all his contact information, website, and stuff in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go check out his website is brooksgibbs.com, and that's BROOKSGIBBS.com. And then social media link is at Brooks Gibbs. So Brooks, super stoked to see you again. I first met you when you spoke at our church. Let's see, man, it's April of 21 when our pastors were going on a pastor retreat, and then you came in and spoke, and then just saw you and your wife Jill when you guys came out just a couple weeks ago, pretty recently. So how did you get into what you're into?
Well, I remember being 14 years old, and I liked this girl named Katie, and her dad was interested in what I wanted to do for a living. And she was afraid to tell him my real desire, which is to be an actor. So before that conversation with her dad, she says, is there anything else that you might want to do with your life besides acting? Because that basically means unemployed to my father. And I said, gosh, I don't know. Tell him a psychologist. And she said, okay, that's so much better. Thank you. And so she told him I want to be a psychologist, and I gained his respect. But that's always stayed with me. Like, what in the world made me think of that? And I think it was just kind of how God wired me. It was always in me, a desire to help people. You know, usually when we go through difficult things, the Bible says the God of all comfort will comfort you in your difficult times so that you could be used to comfort others with the same comfort that you once received. And that same principle, turning pain into purpose, is reflected in The Man's Search for Meaning, the author Viktor Frankl. With existentialism, he described as a psychiatrist that those who can find purpose to their pain will not only survive, but actually thrive. And that's where we get the resilience concept, right? We could leverage adversity for our own psychological growth. And I knew that back when I was 14 years old. My parents were split when I was 3. I went through a real tumultuous time with my stepdad. I moved in with my dad, who had actually, his favorite songs, All My Exes Live in Texas. He's had multiple wives over the years and couldn't seem to keep a relationship together. And so my middle school miserable years were with him, in and out of homes and in and out of relationships. And by the time I hit 14, I became a Christian. I decided to clean up my life. And I realized that I had a cutting edge advantage to other kids my age of seeing the dark side of life and experimenting with things that could have hijacked and destroyed my life. And so I felt stronger. I felt more powerful. I felt more helpful and useful. And I thought, I like being a helper. So that was the inception, I think, when I was 14 to decide to go in psychology. But I also had a heart for theology. So when I was 20, I became an ordained pastor, but I always had two jobs. I would teach God's word to the church, but then I would teach God's wisdom to the world as an author, speaker, psychologist in the school systems. And so bullying has always been a big deal. It seems to be a very lucrative market. It has been for me. Someone asked a bank robber, "Why do you rob banks?" And the robber replied, "Because that's where the money's at." People ask me, "Why do you speak in schools?" Because that's where the money's at. And I can make a difference and a living at the same time. And I believe that's where I feel the pleasure of God when I'm in front of, just like it was this week. I was in front of upstate New York, about 3,000 students, several auditoriums, and I taught them how to be emotionally resilient, to cure them of their offendability, to teach them how to love their life, the life they have, not the one they wish they have, so they don't needlessly suffer. And so every day is just an unbelievable blessing to share all that I have learned over the years.
Wow. That's awesome, Brooks. That's a lot of skinny. How do you teach emotional resiliency to kids?
I first make the connection that what happens to them does not directly affect them emotionally. So no one can hurt your feelings. No one can upset you. No one can anger you. No one can push your buttons. There is no button. I tell students, there's no anger app that I can download, connect Bluetooth to your brain, and all of a sudden give you anger feelings. I said, I don't have access to your emotions, nor does anybody else. You're the only one that does, and you're thinking, and you're processing, and you're interpreting, and your evaluation and judgments of what happens to you. And so if we're going to affect your feelings, if we're going to change your feelings, influence your feelings, the only place we can go to do that is not necessarily change your environment or what happens to you, but we change your judgment, your thinking. A, B, C. A is the aggressions you experience, the activating events, the unwanted crap you got to go through. And B is your belief system. So A must go through B before C is manifest, which is your emotional consequence. So for the first time ever, I teach students that the same thing the Stoic philosophers taught them. It's not what happens to you that disturbs you, but your interpretation of what happens to you that causes disturbance. So your thinking is the cause to your pain. All that happened to you was a contributing factor, right? They contributed to your pain by stimulating an activating event, coming up to you and saying, "I don't like you." And the moment they said, "I don't like you," you are flooded with negative feelings. And it happens so fast, you think they hurt your feelings. But what you are not aware of is the belief system that you have built about people saying they don't like you, or about that one person saying they don't like you. Perhaps a stranger says they don't like you and you don't give a flying flip. But that important person in your life says they don't like you and you're devastated. It has everything to do with your evaluation, your judgment, your belief system, your thinking about who that person is and what they said that ultimately determines how you feel. That is such a mind screw for kids. They've never heard that in their entire lives. It doesn't seem to be what they experience. They think immediately after someone is mean to me, I feel bad, therefore they made me feel bad. But my logic is superior to theirs, and they submit to the superiority of the logic. They understand the ABC model, which was invented by Dr. Albert Ellis, and that is the foundation for them to take personal responsibility for their feelings by changing their thinking. And it's in their thinking that resilience is built, because resilience demands that you reframe the unwanted event in such a way where you consider yourself advantageous. It's a benefit. Resilience demands that you're going to now leverage that unwanted event, that adversity, for your own psychological growth. And that's going to take reframing, rethinking, restructuring of your belief system. And it's not that hard, actually. It's actually profoundly simple. And I teach them how to do that.
Wow. So, so awesome. So all the principles that you shared are absolutely applicable to adults. I think there's a lot of adults that haven't heard the ABCs as well. And in fact, a lot of the ones that I've worked with have not have not. And heck, I didn't hear about this stuff until 4 years ago. Another thing that you shared with me when we were sitting in church after church was over, you said, "Hey, do you know what the?" You said, "Do you know what the like the number one indicator of emotional intelligence is, or something to that effect?" Can you, which was in offendability, which is what you shared with me, is what you just shared the solution to inoffendability?
Yes, because that's ultimately the pathway to resilience. When I'm no longer offended by the unwanted event, it's sort of a two-step process. And I'm actually excited that it happened because I see the benefit for me. That's the second step. That's when you have an unstoppable human being that, that literally unstoppable. You cannot stop the person who refuses to take offense to an unwanted event, an adversary or an adversity, and actually consider themselves advantageous, like this is to my benefit. I'm so glad this happened. They actually lean into it. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That, and by the way, they're not living a lie. This is what some people think. They think, well, I don't want to lie to myself. What happened to me was really bad. It's true, it is bad, but it was also very good. Huh? You just can't, for some reason, you haven't disciplined your mind to find the upside in every letdown. That's a skill set. You haven't disciplined your mind to find the good in every bad. And it has nothing to do with lying to yourself. It's simply broadening your perspective, and it's actually more in touch with truth. It's more in touch with truth than the way you're living. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is what I'm asking you to see about the unwanted event in your life. And there's a lot of good that can come from this. And entrepreneurs will tell you that, by the way. They'll say, what makes me successful as an entrepreneur is I exploit opportunities that some people might consider catastrophic. I don't see problems. I only see opportunities that are waiting to be exploited. And I have become extremely good at exploitation of problems. And that's fantastic. So with the way I teach a kid, going back to what I was saying earlier, that in their thinking, in their belief system, it's a very simple process to build resilience. Dr. Albert Ellis explains it this way. You're only disturbed or upset or offended because you have a rigid demand in your belief system about what just happened to you. And it usually sounds like this. You have no right to be rude. You must respect me. You absolutely shouldn't exclude me from that group. You have no right to talk bad about me behind my back. That must never, ought to never happen to me ever. And so all CBT and REBT and all the social sciences that are on the cognitive science dimension of psychology, they teach therapists to have clients give up the grip of their demands and convert those demands into desires that are lightly held, or another word for them is preferences. So in other words, instead of saying you have no right to be rude, instead you say, I'd like you to be nice to me. It'd be nice if you'd stop being rude. Instead of you must not be rude, you better not be rude. It'd be really cool if you were cool with me. I'd like you to stop being rude. And just by giving up that grip from a demand to just a lightly held desire, a wish, a hope, a preference, you immediately take the edge off the anger. So you're not blackout rage. You're not hyperventilating. There's no anxiety or stress. There's no overwhelming regret or depression. It's just a bummer, or my favorite term, well, that's too bad. This unwanted event, I hoped it wouldn't happen. Well, that's just too bad that it did happen. So from an emotional spectrum perspective, I'm just lightly on the negative spectrum of emotion, and I'm bummed. I'm not despairing, devastated. I'm not even strongly disappointed. I'm just bummed a little bit. And that's the start of helping a person become resilient, by regulating their emotions from catastrophizing to just slightly bummed. And then once they get there, they can take the next step, which is actually even easier, which is finally saying, all right, how can this be a good thing for me, right? How could this turn out to my advantage? Now that they've kind of released their rigidity and become a lot more flexible to a simple desire or preference, they're perfectly positioned to now say, you know what? I actually not only accept what's happened to me without any desire of it being different, but I'm actually glad it did. But in order to get to that point, you have to convince yourself authentically, living in truth, that this is to your advantage. And so I've developed 3 questions. It's a cognitive exercise to practice every time an unwanted event happens to you. And if you ask yourself these 3 questions and answer them authentically in order, you will very quickly develop a resilient mindset and rid yourself of offendability. The first question is, how could this have been worse? So I throw the unwanted event against the backdrop of something more negative. I maybe compare myself to someone who has it worse than me, or I compare this event to something else that has happened worse to me in the past. Well, this isn't the worst thing I've gone through. Or something that hypothetically could have happened. You know, I count my lucky stars, so to speak, that it's not as bad as it could be. And when you do that, you actually lower your rock bottom threshold. So you're not as devastated as you could be. You realize that cognitively. Other people have it worse. You've had it worse at some time in your life, or it could have been worse in some way. And so you already feel less bad about it once you authentically convince yourself that it could have been worse. So how could this be worse? The second question I ask is, why won't this matter in my future? You keep the problem in its proper size. The offense, the criticism, the unwanted event, the adversity in your life, whatever it is, it's just a moment. This light affliction is just for a moment, right? It's a temporary problem. And so once I understand the brevity of it and I keep it in its proper size, and I realize it has no long-term negative ramification on my life, now I feel kind of indifferent towards the whole freaking thing. You know, it could be worse. It really won't matter in my future. Hey, I ask my third question now. Now I'm in a position mentally where I get to authentically answer this question. How could this turn out for my good? Wow, because it can. It absolutely can. I could exploit this mofo. I can make this thing to my benefit. Like a boxer needs a good sparring partner in the ring to get better at what they do. I need a jerk in my life to show me 2 things. Number 1, where I'm emotionally weak. Wow, they hit the spot. And number 2, I can now practice my resilience skills or my conflict resolution skills or my response skills. This is fantastic. I'm only going to get better because this is in my life. Bring the load, bring the heavy. I'm leaning into it. And so I can count it all joy when I fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of my faith produces something like patience, and I'll be complete, lacking nothing. So I call it negative, neutral, positive. That's the cognitive exercise that I have to go through. Negative, how could this be worse? Neutral, why won't this matter in my future? Positive, how could this turn out for my good? And I do that so quick. Let me give you a quick example. Unfortunately, a couple months ago, I picked up my little dog from the haircut place, put the leash on, put the dog in my lap, a little designer golden doodle, $3,000 dog. Is my oldest son's dog. Windows down, driving, enjoying the wind, and then she just jumps out. And I hold on to the leash, of course, because I had the leash in my hand in case that would happen. I already knew in my mind, I'm risking her jumping out, so I better hold on to the leash. Well, because of the haircut, she slipped out of the leash. And unfortunately, she hit the pavement and she was crushed. And immediately I pulled over and I accepted what happened. This happened. This is my reality. And this, because I'm so good at this, I've disciplined myself to do this. I've authored this process, so I better be, right? But it was amazing how it immediately went to work at the moment of trauma. I got up, I immediately ran into the road. I saw that she was crushed. She had maybe a minute or 2 to live. And I sat down with her and I comforted the dog and I told her it was going to be okay. And an immediate thought, I said, at least this was not a child. I've had a friend who crushed a child because of something. He was backing up and he didn't realize his daughter was there. And I immediately realized, I'm so glad this was not a child. What a relief it's not a child. And then, so that was, how could it be worse? And then I thought, well, people have dogs and dogs die and they move on. I've had dogs in my life. Dogs come and go. They have a limited lifespan. So that's what I literally was thinking as I was praying with her and talking with her. This is what I thought in my subconscious and my conscience. It was all working. And then I thought, I'm not going to have to listen to this dog yap. She is so freaking annoying every time a neighbor comes. We have bark collars on her. We tried to train her. Nothing works. We'll never have to worry about her yap again. And I kind of chuckled, but that's God honest truth of what I thought. The yap is over, and that's a relief. Now, I still had to tell my children. I still had to explain it to my wife, and I had to comfort them. But they too have been trained. And in sharing and grieving and crying with them, I was able to, with great pastoral bedside manner, take them through the same process of, guys, we're not going to be destroyed by this. We're actually going to grow from this. And we could be, if based on how we react to this trauma, if we can pass this test, the next trauma is just a matter of time. That's how life works. We're going to be devastated by a harsh reality sometime in the future. It's just a matter of time. That's how life works. From tragedy to tragedy, life continues. And so this is an opportunity to use our comfort skills to talk ourselves off the ledge of irrationality and despair so that we maintain resilience and mental health.
Wow. Brooks, man. So first of all, I'm so sorry that happened. So, because that would be no joke experience, obviously, for you and the family. Two, what a powerful exercise, and a simple exercise that one can implement in their life to begin impacting their resilience, their emotional health, their emotional intelligence. What have you observed the impact of COVID and all the stuff that's been going on the last couple of years, the impact on our youth?
Well, I'm on the board for a suicide hotline called the Hope Line. It's a national thing. Dawson McAllister used to run it before he passed away. And we saw 1,000% increase in chat engagement. They do chats. They used to do phone calls, but now kids would rather chat. And we could do 3 chats at a time from a Hope Coach perspective. So it's more efficient that way. And so we saw 1,000% increase. And I think going back to what we know to be true, it's not what happens to you that determines your emotional consequence, but what you believe about what happens to you. And we discovered that because the world was catastrophizing, so were the children. Because children, I said this to a principal in upstate New York this week. I said, children are a reflection of the grownups around them, and they just parrot what they hear. It's amazing. Whatever is going on politically in the world, I will get during my Q&A time with 500 kids in the audience, questions at the end of my talk that are of political nature. It's amazing. I've been doing this 22 years. So I've seen a couple of generations of children, come through, and it's amazing how they just reflect whatever tensions are in society at large. So we found ourselves as an organization going through the cognitive exercise of helping them see how this is one of the greatest seasons of their life, and it was not hard for them to figure out how to see the upside to this letdown. We talked about not having to go to school and how you could actually remotely, turn in your stuff, and you could spend more time. Kids are socializing more after COVID than they were during COVID. Before COVID. Before COVID, they had 8 hours in school with no texting. Once COVID hit, now that 8 hours is off the table, and they can text their friends at all times. See, a child communicates with their friend via text, and even when they're next to their friend physically. And they're actually, their personality, oftentimes students feel, is way more enhanced with emojis and GIFs and links and stuff than if they had to hold a conversation and be funny in person, right? So they borrow someone else's humor through YouTube links and GIFs and emojis to describe what they really can't describe on their face in front. So they feel more like themselves when they're remote anyways. So as an organization, we decided to ramp up the reframing, the narrative they tell themselves really quickly. And it wasn't that hard at all. But we do see statistics. I think it was during COVID, actually, when the number 2 cause of death among young people became the number 1 cause, which was suicide. And so that was a really amazing observation. And kids kill themselves. This is my kind of opinion, and it's also James Lehman's statement. But he said in his research of survival, people who try to commit suicide and failed, and as he interviewed them, he said 20% of suicides were caused by depression. The vast majority of the suicides were caused because of lack of coping techniques. They didn't know how to solve their problems, right? They didn't know how to resolve the feeling of pain. They wanted the pain to go away. And so that's what I teach. I realized, well, if I really want to keep kids from killing themselves, especially in a post-COVID era where the risk is higher now than ever, then I need to give them coping skills to regulate emotions. And what I found when I focus on cleaning their belief system, I call it cognitive dialysis. That's the term I've coined. When I'm counseling kids, I'm attempting to do a dialysis of their thinking process. They share their thoughts through verbal throw up, and I pick out or remove the thinking errors known as cognitive distortions and catastrophizing and obsessive negativity. And I recommunicate a new perspective of the very thing that they say they're struggling with. And they can decide whether that's the narrative they're going to believe and choose to walk forward in. That's called renewing your mind. That's another biblical term for it. And so when I do that and they walk away from the session saying, oh man, I can't believe how much better I feel. It's because you're thinking differently, bro. That's really what we have to do.
So that's something that, so that process of, thinking dialysis or whatever you just,
Yeah, mental dialysis, you can call it.
Mental dialysis, renewing your mind. That's something that, ultimate empowerment is when we can do that to ourselves. When if I feel like I'm one of the kind of the phases that I'm in is I'm trying to be more, I'm trying to maximize my valleys and really, okay, God, what am I supposed to learn, or what can I learn in this valley, and pull out the flashlight and look around, rather than my normal tendency is to try to run the other way, like, oh, I want out of here as quickly as possible. That would be it's a super powerful tool.
Well,
Okay.
It helps if you have a framework to work from.
Okay.
So if you know where the dysfunctions are and you can call them a mile away, that's really, really good. I'll give you a few. I have the cognitive dialysis, or the mental dialysis that I do, is built on a 12-part framework that I've built. 6 elements are your expectations for life, and the other 6 are your interpretations of life. So if I can help pick out where you're wrong in your expectations, and I do mean objectively wrong, you're looking at this the wrong way. I don't believe in relativism. I believe in right and wrong. And I also believe that in your interpretations, or how you process this, in your evaluations and judgments of the whole thing, not just your expectations, but your interpretations of what's happening, you're also could be wrong in 6 areas. And the first 6, I'll just rattle off quick, and it'll be good for show notes. People can look at it. But it's, I must perform perfectly well. So there's perfectionism. And receive approval from important people. There's approval addiction. Or I'm inadequate. The not enough feeling emerges when you have these demands about yourself being perfect or receiving approval from other people. And so that's easy for me to spot. I can hear it in people. A girl just came out to me the other day. She says, I just have this feeling that I'm not enough. I said, we call that inadequacy. And she said, yeah. I said, is God honest truth? My very next words were, do you suffer from chronic criticism from your parents? She says, yes. I said, what are they criticizing? She said, my grades. She said, how did you know? I said, I'm good. Okay. So let me ask you this. What are your grades? She says, I get C's. I said, well, how could it be worse? I used the negative, neutral, positive in a quick intervention with her. I said, how could it be worse? She said, well, I could be failing. I'm like, that's right. You're getting C's. And girl, I got 2 doctorates. C's get degrees. Let me tell you. Okay. I've been in school my whole life. C's get degrees. So we're average in a lot of areas. We drive an average car. We work an average job. We produce average content. We marry an extraordinary wife, and there's only a few things we're extraordinary, but the vast majority of our life is average. So C's get degrees. She says, yeah, you're right. It could be worse. It could be failing. Now, why won't this matter in your future? She says, well, I'm not an academic. I don't really care about school. I'm just going to get through it to do the job I really want. I said, awesome. Now, how could this turn out for your good? She couldn't think of it. I said, well, let me tell you, when you parent your kids, you're going to not condemn them. You're not going to criticize them. You're going to exhort them. You're going to tell them, you're doing really good. I could see this little area of improvement. You can do a little bit better, but let me tell you, I'm so proud of you and I accept you if you never change a thing. I said, you're going to be the most understanding mother because you've learned, you have a front row seat to such dysfunctional parenting styles that's destroying you on the inside. She hugged me immediately and thanked me so much. And I did a dialysis with her and now she's going back with confidence. So I won't spend as much time with the other things, but I must perform perfectly well and receive approval from important people or I'm inadequate, right? Those are the first 2. The second 2 are, you must be fair and not block my goals or you deserve punishment. And that is when we have problems with other people. We have a fairness construct. We also have low frustration tolerance. So when someone blocks our goals and we're frustrated, we can't handle it. But the resilient person says, no, I'm glad you're in my life. When Jesus said, love your enemy, he literally meant love that they're there. Love that they're there because they're working on things that need to be worked on in your character. Also, haters is how heaven hooks you up. When you're persecuted, you get rewarded in heaven. So think like an investor. You're throwing your investments on the other side. You need them in your life like a boxer needs a good sparring partner. The other thing, 2, after that, are life must be comfortable and turn out how I envision, or it's unbearable. So we have an inability for discomfort. You don't want to be uncomfortable. So you're constantly looking, and that's why you hate life sometimes. Oh, my life is so uncomfortable. My life must be comfortable. Well, we got to deal with that. It's okay to wish that your life was comfortable, but not demand that your life was comfortable. And actually, if you can lean into the uncomfortableness and see the value of it, negative, neutral, positive, then you could be, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross and despised the shame. You could lean into the suffering. The suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared to the glory that will be revealed in us. There's so much biblical kind of like precedent for the things I'm teaching. So life must be comfortable and turn out how I envision. That's idealism. So when I hear idealism, I had this vision, my 5-year goal, my life was not supposed to turn out this way, or the relationship should have turned out. I mean, I saw ourselves together till death do us part, but now she's left me. And it's that idealism that we have demands that she must be my wife forever. Well, that's stupid, okay? Because you don't know forever. The Chinese are so smart. And the reason why they succeed and dominate the planet, because they are under no delusion that they can control the future. They do not try to do what Americans do, and that's reverse engineer goals. They do not do that. They think that is an exercise in futility and a complete waste of time. All they do is control what they can control today and try to exploit what they control to their advantage. So they're constantly tweaking things to their benefit, and that's why they dominate. And we can do the same thing. That's actually the kingdom mindset. Don't worry about tomorrow, because today you have enough worries of its own. So leverage today's problems for your advantage, because that's how the kingdom works. First 6. Last 6, I'm just going to throw out a few. These are now interpretations, not expectations. Interpretations like labeling or judging. Sometimes we label people. Oh, they're a liar. They're a thief, because they one time lied, or they one time stole something, or you perceive they did. So unfortunately, you judge them or you label them with a sweeping kind of, you call it global judgment or global label to say they're nothing but a liar, or they're a bully. And we do that to ourselves as too. I'm a loser, I'm a failure. So that's our interpretation of our happenings. Another one might be magnifying the negative at the exclusion of all that's positive. We hyper-focus. It's called selective arbitration in the literature. We look at the very minor negative things. And then if we combine the two, a focus on the negative with the sweeping judgment, that creates a third thing called overgeneralization. This is what racism is, or prejudice is, right? We think because I had this one bad experience in this context, everyone in that context has the same bad experience. And that's a simple thinking error. Or what about psychic? I know what you're thinking, or I know what's going to happen in the future. That's called future telling, or mind reading. That's all under sort of the psychic thinking error. No, you don't know what they're thinking. There may be a very reasonable explanation to their stink eye that they gave you. Maybe they have pink eye, and that's why they have stink eye. It's not because they're judging you. Another one is blame or personalizing. It's the same idea. Oh, this happened because of me. I'm the reason why everyone's not getting along, or it's just my luck. That's stupid. Or catastrophizing, which is sort of like, oh no, the world is falling, everything's going to happen. It's sort of like future telling, but it's in a negative context, saying it's all going to fall apart. And the final one, and you're going to hate doing all these show notes, but the final one is all or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking, or extreme or polarizing. It's all the same idea that says I'm either going to be quarterback or I'm not going to play at all. I'm either going to date this person or I'm never going to date again. It's all or nothing. So when you have a framework to work from, when you're working on yourself or you're working for others, and you're focusing on their belief system, which is their mental process, and you're perfectly positioned to have a mental dialysis to clean their thinking. When you have a framework like I just described, you can start looking for these expectation flaws or interpretation flaws and correct them with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And like a chiropractor has to kind of stretch the back to pop the neck properly, we are correcting the thinking to help release the resiliency that they possess within.
Wow. Oh man, that's amazing. So many amazing things. Okay, so all of these tools, all these principles apply to somebody that is struggling with depression or suicidal ideations or whatever. I would imagine, and I'm sure there's exceptions and stuff, but I would imagine that understanding, developing our understanding in these areas would have a huge impact on our emotional regulation.
Yes, exactly. In fact, when I address depression, when I address anxiety, when I address suicide ideation or non-suicidal self-injurious behavior, like cutting, burning, even tattooing sometimes is a form of self-pacification and self-injury that's non-suicidal, right? You're kind of journaling on your body, and you want that pain, endorphins are releasing, you have that pleasure, and it can become an addiction. So however it's released, or excessive workout, I mean, there's all kinds of ways. There's actually 1,000 ways of dysfunction, that dysfunction emerges. I never leave the framework. So I say, what is the event, the unwanted event that has happened to you that you have not learned to accept or consider yourself privileged because of? Because usually if it's depression, they are regretting an event in the past. If it's anxiety, they're fearing an event in the future. So all that is the thinking errors placed in the past, or the thinking errors placed in the future related to some sort of activating event that happens to them in their life or did happen to them in the future. And so that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? So I'm not afraid by, oh, I'm suffering from depression, or I've got an anxiety disorder, panic attacks, or, I'm not afraid of things like trauma, or like those really scary words, or just overarching mental health. Like, I'm not afraid anymore because I know the ingredients of what's at work. So it's pretty awesome. Now, suicide, for example, is a desire to escape. And it's essentially going back to what James Lehman said, a lack of coping techniques. They tried alcohol, they tried drugs, they tried talk therapy, they tried medication, they tried leaving the environment, they tried all these things. Nothing has worked. Therefore, the only way I can leave the pain is to leave life. So it's actually a form of self-preservation. That's a pretty interesting statement I just said. How is suicide a form of self-preservation? Well, you're trying to stop the pain, stop feeling bad. That's why they say it's the most selfish act one can have. A girl told me yesterday, I wanted to share this with you. A girl told me yesterday, I was at a coffee shop. I heard her complaining. I knew the person she was complaining to. And so they dragged me into it. Brooks is a psychologist. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Hit me. What's up? And one of the first things she says is, I hate myself. I said, no, you don't. You love yourself. And that's a problem. She said, what are you talking about? And she was describing of all the reasons why she has proof that she hates herself. I said, you just gave me an airtight, irrefutable case that you love yourself with all the same excuses. I said, let me explain it very simply in a matter of seconds. When something bad happens to your best friend, are you happy or sad? She says, I'm sad. I said, if something bad happens to your worst enemy, are you happy or sad? She says, I guess I'm happy. I said, when something bad happens to you, are you happy or sad? She says, I'm sad. You're treating yourself like your best friend, which means you love yourself. And you're sad when bad things happen to you, which is proof that you're in love with yourself. Plus, there's no biblical precedent that says we hate ourselves. The Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And to men, he says, love your wife like Christ loved the church. No one had, or like you love your own body, because no one has hated his body, but nourishes it all the time. So actually, the problem with our mental, I guess, dysfunction, or another way to put it is a neurosis, right? Our sickness, our illness, is we love ourselves too much. We're always thinking about ourselves, and the thoughts that we're thinking about ourselves are so twisted and convoluted because we're trying to defend ourselves and consider ourselves the hero of our story as well as the victim and the of the story, that we're so self-ingrown that we need to think about others. We need to think in truth and reality, and we need to get out of ourselves. So that's, I think, what counseling is correcting your thinking and getting over yourself, denying yourself, and putting others before yourself. That's how you stay out of depression.
Wow. One of the quotes I've heard is, the more you serve others, the smaller your problems get.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like it's got a little
And people with clinical depression hate that type of talk because they believe in this pseudo-psychological chemical imbalance fraud, that there's some sort of chemical imbalance, like it's some sort of mystery mixture or something like that. And it's really interesting, if you Google and research chemical imbalance, there's not one single scientific paper that can describe it. It's a pop psychology armchair explanation for the mystery of the mind, of this chemical imbalance. And we know we are chemical and electrical. That's what our brain is made of. And in this synaptic, cellular level of the brain, we go from electric to chemical to electric. And then the synapses, the connections, many times are chemical. And that's why we have drugs that could be inhibitors of those connections, like SSRIs, to help with depressive, overwhelming thoughts, or maybe obsessive or compulsive thoughts and behaviors. But the truth is, most of our brain is structured through our cognitive process, our evaluation capacity. That's why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And I don't mean to bore people that are listening, but I would be very careful to shift responsibility for your emotional pain on some mysterious excuse of trauma or chemical imbalance or genetic predisposition to mental illness, or whatever excuse that you keep on. It's the renewing of your mind. It is taking personal responsibility for what you expect in life and how you interpret life that will help you find a homeostasis, peace in your heart, it's for everybody. Minus 8% of the population that is cognitively impaired, what we used to call mentally retarded, but now that's socially unacceptable to say so. But for the vast majority of the people actually do have the capacity to control what they feel by managing what they think.
Brooks, man. Wow, this has been amazing. I absolutely can't thank you enough for sharing your insights and wisdom, and super stoked to get this episode out to the audience and
I
stuff.
want to comment on a comment that will likely be posted in objection to everything that they've heard. How do I know what they're going to say? Because look, I have a huge online presence, and this is what people say to me all the time. So the number one objection to everything you just heard today is stop blaming victims, Brooks. They've gone through enough trauma already. Geesh, I'd never come to you for help. So it's the blaming victims that is the cheap shot for asking quote unquote victims to take responsibility for their emotional state. And there's a big difference between blaming and putting responsibility on them. I only blame people who do things on purpose, and most people do not suffer on purpose. They actually don't know why they suffer. So how could I blame them? How could I say it's your fault? No, there was no intention of self-infliction. So they're doing it without knowing it. It's sort of a preconscious, subconscious operation. That's why I have to have the light of illumination happen. I have to educate. Most counseling is educating and assigning homework for challenging the dysfunctional beliefs. So we're really teachers, right? We're educating and assigning homework. And so teachers don't blame kids for not knowing something, but they do say it's your responsibility to learn, and I'll be there to show you the laws that govern your problem and suggested solutions to solve your problem, because it doesn't have to be confusing. There is something you can do to stop feeling bad. So consider what we taught today, empowering those who feel helpless with the responsibility, their own sense of agency, that internal locus of control we're awakening so that they can decide what type of life they're going to live and enjoy the life they have.
I think that's the ultimate empowerment of us as humans is understanding that it's our responsibility. One of the things I share with people is like, it's not your fault what happened to you as a kid, whatever you experienced as a kid, but it is your responsibility to heal and grow from it. Not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Otherwise, whoever we are maybe blaming consciously or subconsciously, we are ultimately giving them control. I'm giving you control. So until Brooks does something about whatever I think Brooks did to me, I'm helpless. I'm a helpless victim until Brooks does some, changes the scenario, whatever. And that's the ultimate, man, that's the ultimate victim and the ultimate position of weakness, I would imagine, until I can, no. It's, and like you said, okay, many times someone does not have malintent. Maybe there's some exceptions to that, but even still, it's my responsibility. It's my, the extreme ownership, Big Jocko Willink. It's my responsibility. I have to own, and then another great book, Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. What's in my property line is my responsibility. You may have driven over my grass or whatever and put car tracks in my grass, but it's still it's my grass. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do to repair the grass.
Or the snow is falling on my roof. I could blame God or the government, but I'm the one that has to keep it from caving in.
That's great. Yes, that's great, man. Brooks, this has been amazing, bro. Absolutely.
Well, all that to go back to our final kind of like what I baited your brain when we first interacted about this a month ago or so. We can learn to rid ourselves of offendability. We can choose not to be offended, but it's going to take giving up the grip of our demands that those people don't do that, fully embrace that they did do that. Therefore, they should have done that because that is a harsh reality, and yet it is reality. So I like to adjust to reality as opposed to demanding reality adjust to me. And I kick into a mental illness, unfortunately, if I do that. So if I want to stay healthy, I accept that what just happened. And I embrace it and I squeeze it for all its goodness, which is a wonderful discipline of the mind.
Man, Brooks, thank you so much, brother. Absolutely cannot thank you enough for your time and all the, man, the lives you've sown into, and the lives that you are impacting through your work and ministry that you are doing. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man, I admire what you do. You have some amazing guests. My favorite thing about you is that you're always learning. And it's actually, in my opinion, what the show is. It's your journey of learning stuff so you could be even more useful to your clients. And that's the definition of teachable, which I think is, first of all, the qualification for any leader in the church, for example. It always says he needs to be able to teach. And that's what teachable means. We mean it in the sense of able to learn, but vernacular, right? If you actually switch around the words, teachable means able to teach. So I think what qualifies you to do what you're doing in the boardroom with, high-level leaders is proof right here in the podcast as you prove that you're able to learn. And so you're a good example for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks.